Leaving the main stream, they now passed into what seemed like a little landlocked lake. Green grass sloped down to either edge. Brown, snaky tree roots gleamed below the surface of the quiet water. Ahead of them could be heard the foamy tumble of a ware with a restless dripping mill wheel attached to the mill house. The scene was so beautiful that the mole could only hold up both forepaws and gasp, "Oh my!" The rat brought the boat alongside the bank and tied it up. Then he helped the still awkward mole safely ashore and swung out the luncheon basket. The mole asked to be allowed to unpack it all by himself. The rat was very pleased to indulge him. Mole excitedly shook out the tablecloth and spread it. Then one by one he took out the mysterious packets and carefully arranged or organized them, still gasping, "Oh my, oh my." When all was ready, the rat said, "Eat up, old fellow," and the mole, who had started his spring cleaning at a very early hour and had not eaten since then, eagerly set to work. "What are you looking at?" said the rat presently, when the edge of their hunger was somewhat dulled, and the mole's eyes were able to wander off the tablecloth. "I am looking," said the mole, "at a streak of bubbles that I see traveling along the surface of the water." "Bubbles? Oh," said the rat cheerfully. A broad glistening muzzle showed itself above the edge of the bank, and the otter hauled himself out and shook the water from his coat. "Greedy beggars," he observed. "Why didn't you invite me, Ratty?" "This was a spontaneous affair," explained the rat. "By the way, meet my friend, Mr. Mole." "Proud, I'm sure," said the otter, and the two animals were friends forthwith. "Such a rumpus everywhere," continued the otter. "The entire world seems to be out on the river today. I came up with this backwater to try and get a moment's peace, and then stumbled upon you fellows." At that moment there was a rustling sound behind them. It seemed to come from a hedge wherein last year's leaves still clung. Seconds later a stripy head with high shoulders peered out from within. "Come on, old badger," shouted the rat. The badger trotted forward, then grunted, company," and turned his back and disappeared from the view. "That's just the sort of fellow he is," observed the disappointed rat. "Simply hates society. Now, we shouldn't see any more of him today. Well, tell us, who's out on the river?" "Toad's out for one," replied Otter, "in his brand new wager boat. New togs, new everything." A wager boat is a special boat used for rowing races. They were called wager boats because people would wage bets or gamble on the winner. Togs are special clothes worn for an activity. The two animals looked at each other and laughed. "Once it was nothing but sailing," said the rat. "Then he tired of that and took to punting. Nothing would please him but to punt all day. Last year it was houseboating, and we all had to go and stay with him in his houseboat and pretend we liked it. It's all the same. Whatever he takes up, he gets tired of it and starts on something fresh." "Such a good fellow, too," remarked the otter. "But no stability, especially on a boat. Stability is to stay still or not move." From where they sat, they could get a glimpse of the main stream across the island that separated them, and just then a wager boat flashed into view. The rower was a short, stout figure who was splashing badly and rolling a good deal, but working his hardest. The rat stood up and hailed him down. That means try to get his attention. However, Toad, for it was he, shook his head and concentrated on the task at hand. "He'll be out of the boat in a minute if he rolls like that," said the rat. "Of course he will," chuckled the otter. "Did I ever tell you that good story about Toad and the lock keeper?" So this is a canal lock. In a canal lock, there is a lock that is used to block off the gates. So it blocks off water, and then they're opened or closed to let water fill in and drain from the locks so that boats can safely move. A lock keeper is in charge of keeping these gates locked or unlocked. And this is a mayfly. Mayflies are insects that are similar to dragonflies. They live near water, but they only live for a few hours to a few days, and then they die. "The story happened this way," Otter continued. Toad, at that moment, a mayfly swerved unsteadily. on the gentle spring breeze towards Otter. There was a swirl of water and a cloop, and the mayfly was no longer visible. Neither was the otter. The mole looked down. The voice was still in his ears, but the grass whereon he had sprawled was clearly vacant. Vacant means empty. Not an otter to be seen. But again there was a streak of bubbles on the surface of the river. The rat hummed a tune, and the mole remembered that it was considered rude to make any sort of comments about the sudden disappearance of one's friends. Well, well, said the rat, I suppose we ought to keep moving. I wonder which one of us should pick up the luncheon basket. He did not sound overly eager to do it himself. Oh, please let me, said the mole. So, of course, the rat let him. The afternoon sun was getting low as the rat sculled gently homewards. The mole was very full of lunch and felt self-satisfaction, and already quite at home in a boat, or so he thought. He was, however, getting a bit restless, and presently he said, Ratty, please, I want to row now. So if you're getting restless, like you feel like you need to move or do something. The mole was quiet for a minute or two, but he began to feel more and more jealous of Rat. Suddenly he jumped up and seized the sculls from him. That means to grab suddenly. Rat, who had been gazing out over the water, was taken by surprise. He fell backwards off his seat. The triumphant mole took his place and grabbed the sculls with much confidence. Stop it, you silly, cried the rat from the bottom of the boat. You'll have us over. The mole flung his sculls back with a flourish and made a great dig at the water. He missed the surface altogether, his legs flew up above his head, and he found himself lying on top of the rat. Greatly alarmed, he made a grab at the side of the boat, and the next moment, sploosh! Over went the boat, and Mole found himself struggling in the river. Oh my, how cold the water was, and how very wet it felt, how it sang in his ears as he went down, 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 how bright and welcome the sun looked as he rose to the surface, coughing and spluttering. How black was his despair when he felt himself sinking again. Then a firm paw gripped him by the back of his neck. It was the rat, and he was laughing. The rat got a hold of Skull and shoved it under the mole's arm. Then he did the same by the other side of him, and swimming behind, propelled the helpless animal to shore. When the rat had rubbed him down and wrung some of the wet out of him, he said, Now then, old fellow, trot up and down until you're warm and dry again, while I dive for the luncheon basket. So the dismal mole, wet without and ashamed within, or embarrassed, trotted about until he was fairly dry, while the rat plunged into the water again. He recovered the boat, fetched his floating property, and finally dived successfully for the luncheon basket. When all was ready to begin, the mole, limp and dejected, that means feeling depressed or alone, took his seat in the stern of the boat, and as they set off, he said in a low voice, Ratty, my generous friend, I am very sorry indeed for my foolish behavior. My heart quite fails me when I think how I might have lost that beautiful luncheon basket. I have been a fool. Will you ever forgive me? That's all right, bless you, responded the rat. What's a little wet to a water rat? I'm more in the water than out of it most days. Don't you think any more about it, and look here, I really think you had better come and stop with me for a little time. My home is very plain and rough, but I'm sure I can make you comfortable, and I'll teach you how to row and swim. The mole was so touched by his kindness that he had to brush away a tear, but the rat kindly looked in another direction, and before long the mole's spirits were revived again. When they got home, the rat made a bright fire in the parlor. He planted the mole in an armchair in front of it. He fetched down a dressing gown and slippers for him, and told him river stories till supper time. Supper was a most cheerful meal. Shortly afterwards, a sleepy mole had to be escorted, or brought, upstairs by his host to the best bedroom, where he laid his head on his pillow in great peace and contentment. This was just the beginning of their friendship and time together on the river. So now I want you to think, the story is over for today, but I want you to think about how we know now that Rat is a really good friend. I want you to think about why he's such a good friend. What proves that Rat is being kind to Mole? Was he mad at him when he flipped the boat? Did he help him Where is Mole staying now? I want you to think about these things.